second tune-up workshop. So that Sathra will know how to keep these tapes in order. All right, so do everybody have a table of contents? All right, now this, of course, is an outline of the book itself. This table of contents essentially constitutes pretty much the material that you're going to cover in your workshops. All right, and you might want to make notes of it because you can follow exactly along this course as you do so. You note that there's an introduction. Now, of course, I don't expect you to do a word-by-word play of the introduction as it appears in the book. But certainly the introduction in the book gives you an idea of what introductions can contain. We talked already last time about the functions and objectives and the goals of your introduction, the establishment of rapport, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're not going to beat that horse. And if I'm talking too fast, slow me down. I'm conscientious of the time here. I'm trying to condense so much stuff in here. We talked about last time how you need to define anger. So you can look and again see there's a part somewhere in the book where we do that. So essentially you can take these individual components of the book, divide them up into sessions, and then talk on those issues. And you can flow all the way through your workshop, simply following this outline. And remember, you do it your own way and in your own style. First, were there any questions from last time? Before we plunge into new material. Pretty straightforward stuff here. As one of the things I want to emphasize that there is no substitution for actually practicing these homeworks that relates to this yoga of anger. And anger yoga, or Saramba yoga, as the authors of the Puranas call it, like all yogas, requires that you actually practice it in order to be of any assistance to transferring that information to other people. The homeworks are just some few summaries of the kind of sadhana that is associated with Saramba yoga, anger yoga. And so, therefore, to really have a degree of expertise, then you have got to do this stuff. You have got to do this stuff. Now, you have enough time between now and the second week in September when I hope to collectively debut the workshops to practice some of the homeworks that are in the books. If you have not practiced the homeworks in the book personally, yourself, then it's obvious that it's going to be very hard for you to assist other people in practicing homework. So that's one of the assignments that you definitely want to get done between now and the beginning of your own workshop. You want to practice each of the homework exercises that are in the book and any other homework exercises that we might have talked about that are not in the book. Because that becomes essential. That is the only way that you're going to really develop the intuition and the instinct necessary to respond accurately to the needs of the people who are attending your workshop. And remember, these workshops are aimed to become one of the outlets for the flow of a different kind of spirituality into our communities. We've talked in so many satsangs about the fact that one of the great tragedies that confront our people, our race, as a group, is the absence of any transforming and authentic spirituality. Okay? So we want to be able to really let the spirit of the ancestors flow through these workshops. We want to have some abilities to make sure that the heritage, spiritual heritage, that these teachings of ours reflect is fully flowing in the workshop. So we're going to talk today about a lot of different things, and I invite your questions. As we go a little deeper into this Saranga yoga, what I call anger yoga. And I'm sure most of you never thought that anger was there was a yoga around anger. The depths of ancient time have used every aspect of life to serve as a component in yoga. One of the things you notice about the energy called anger is that it concentrates. It focuses. It focuses you on the object of your anger. You become very concentrated on that. You become obsessed in many instances, right? So anger has the ability to focus the mind. You see, the ancients having that insight, therefore used anger as a means now to penetrate into the depths of the mind. And that's one of the positive views. So Rama Yoga then is the positive application of energy. And I'm not going to burden you with all of that. Perhaps in another workshop where we'll talk about advanced anger management, we'll have a chance to really go into great details about anger yoga, Sarama yoga, and how it all works. I just wanted to make that point clear to you that just as we can take sex and use sex as a means for concentrating attention, concentrating the mind, and then use it to elevate the mind to a spiritual level, the same is the case with every component of our natures. All right, so again, looking at your table of contents, the anatomy of anger, right? By this date, you should be able to define anger, okay? You should be able to define anger. If you haven't been able to come up with that, then I suggest that during now and the interim, between the beginning of the workshops, that you work out for yourself some kind of definition of anger. You definitely want to cover the effects that anger has on the mind, the body, etc., etc. And I think all of you are competent to do that. Do anybody see anything in the outline that is going to be a problem for? Anything in the outline that you feel that you would stumble through or not have a good grasp of it? Because today I want to go a little deeper into the anatomy of anger, the definitions of anger. Because again, I want you to understand, I want you to grasp and appreciate the concepts. All right. We define anger as an emotional response, is that right? To the perception, etc. I've given you already then the psychodynamics of anger. But we need to now talk a little bit about the metaphysics of anger. We're going to talk about the spiritual dynamics of anger. Because that's a little more subtle. And it takes you a little bit deeper into it. Have you ever thought about it? The origins of anger as it relates to consciousness. What happens spiritually, metaphysically speaking, in the process of the generation of anger? Well, the first thing you'll find is that whenever we contemplate an event or object, that is, whenever we externalize attention, and attention encounters an object or an event, right? We begin to initiate this whole process. So the beginning of the process of the experience of anger begins with the externalization of attention onto an object or event. After we have externalized our attention onto an object or event, the next thing that arises in us is a feeling of attachment. Now we talked a lot about attachment business. All right? A feeling of attachment. You have an experience of the object or event. Now, after we've had an experience of the object or the event, what we call attachment, we become attached to it. Right? That attachment is a kind of cleanliness, right? And that attachment then creates in us this desire. Desire. It's a key word. We'll go over this a little bit. I know it's a little esoteric. But I want to give you an esoteric definition of anger. We've got a psychological and all those other definitions out of the word. A desire arises. What the desire is to repeat or continue the experience. Okay? To hold on to the experience. What usually happens now, all of these are events that precede the actual emergence of anger. What happens normally is that this desire gets frustrated. Or interfered with. This interference of the desire, okay, is actually what produces the anger. Remember we said that one of the triggers of most of our anger is when you can't get your way, right? When you look deeply into those things that triggers anger, you will find they all obey this kind of esoteric dynamics, right? Whenever you can't get your way, you get it, right? And whenever it is interfered, you get angry. So whenever you get frustrated or interfered with or something interrupts the fulfillment of your desire, it produces anger. There's more. Now, when this desire for the continuation and perpetuation of that which we become attached to, when this desire produces this anger in us, anger now begins to have an effect on consciousness itself. And the first effect in Sarama Yoga, they call it, some mobile. Actually, that actually means you become emotionally confused. It generates emotional confusion. You become emotionally confused. And you will note that even in the psychodynamics of anger, there's a point in those stages of development where they experience confusion. You can't think clearly, remember? I want you to see where all of that comes from. So, again, you don't have to remember all this stuff. I'm just giving this to you for some background information. After emotional confusion, the next thing that happens is that there's something like, do you know what happens when a computer crashes? Right? You lose access to all of that. Something like that happens too. The memory crashes. The memory, the data, all that stuff that you contain, all the insight, the knowledge, etc., 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 that whole mechanism crashes. The result of that, of course, is that you lose wisdom. You're cut off from knowledge. Right? A state of ignorance is generated. Right? Hence, the old saying that everything that you do in this moment of rage, blind rage, will be wrong. Will be self-defeating, and will be counterproductive every single time. Because those actions now that flow from the loss of wisdom becomes negative on them. They result in negative karma, right? And these negative karmas result in dukkha. Okay? So that's just a brief outline of the spiritual and esoteric dynamics of the origin of anger and how that anger consequences when we don't know how to manage. Okay? So, from these 10 principles and a lot of insight about how anger works can be had. Remember, the goal of Sarama Yoga, of anger yoga, is to learn how to use this otherwise very negative and destructive anger positively for justice making and ma'at making purposes. All right? So, any questions about any of this now? Go ahead.
I have a question about others' anger at you.
All righty.
When I was studying that a couple of days ago, I was wondering how you handle the mismanagement of anger when the person perceives your handling of anger as a challenge. Say, for instance, this person's having a verbal combat with you, and you're validating their anger by saying, I understand that you're angry, I'm sorry that you're angry with me. But because they're not evoking the type of response, because they want you to get angry. You're calm, and the calmer you act, the more angrier they get. How do you diffuse that? How do you...
All right. So we have an instance where the person is not getting relief.
Right. You're not getting relief because you're too calm about the situation.
Okay. Now, we call that mischief. And so the question becomes, how do we handle the other person's mischief? How do we define mischief?
Inappropriate behavior.
Yes, it's inappropriate behavior. It's something that does not need to be done. Right? They're doing something that does not need to be done. Right? And how to disengage from that mischief. Right? Now, we're assuming, first of all, we're making an assumption that their anger was handled correctly, has been handled correctly. That might be too much of an assumption. If the individual, if the other's anger at us is not relieved, then we have to first examine how did we really handle that. Was your response just pat? Was it a canned response? Did it have the appropriate pathos? Was it genuine? You see, I have found that it has been my experience that when the validation is genuine from the heart, not a canned presentation, okay, then that usually produces some relief. It really does. So we have to examine the sincerity of how we handle the other person's anger. You remember somewhere we talked about the feeling of sorrow. I'm sorry. What does that really mean?
It means that your music with the other person is coming from inside of you as a response to their pain.
Yes,
You're more in sync with their pain.
Yes.
Because you've got the feeling that they've been injured, and out of that feeling, you respond.
Right. If that emphatic connection is not there, that response is not going to get all the way in there.
Right.
Right? I'm sorry is a being in a state of empathy with the individual who is having the anger attack. Because it's their anger, right? And our ideal is how to give them some relief from it. Now, Aria raised an important issue. What happens when the other person is angry at you and you can't give them no relief, you can't calm them down, they're really going way off? What do you do? What do you do? Because those are sometimes real situations out there, right?
I think I would ask for a break. I would reiterate myself and my feelings and what I said, and said that when you calm down, I'll be happy. We could talk about this again. And I would remove myself from that situation if I could not give them relief.
All right. Next, how would you have it? Same way you remove the red.
Get to that point, I usually just want to raise myself, to be honest.
Yes. You usually respond with your own counterattack, right? All right, that's honest response. If that doesn't work, we know that.
Right.
How do you handle that?
Just try to keep talking to them and trying to relax.
Pam?
same way. Sometimes when people are angry, I think they get offended when you try and drive home the truth too much. So I would just try as much as possible, just try to be with with what they're feeling, and then I would withdraw myself.
Withdraw yourself. Lord?
I would definitely withdraw myself.
You would
But I
definitely
would,
do that,
yes, because I had that experience. And I would acknowledge that I know that they are angry because of some reason. And I would just, like Leah or Avia said, withdraw myself until they calm down. Because a lot of times people are so enraged that they can't hear you no way. So it's best if they would calm down and then you would clear the people.
Sandra?
I think I would really try to examine how effective I'm being, how I'm coming across, because I know sometimes when I'm right in the middle of some heated discussion, and I notice the other person is angry, I'm trying to deal with that anger. I get sarcastic. I'll say something flip. I'm sorry, and not really mean. And I guess I would first examine myself and see just how sincere I am. And then if that doesn't work, then I will remove myself.
That's very good.
I guess it would depend on what they were angry at me about and if they were justified in being angry. I would still attempt to let them know that I apologize for whatever it was. And then just give them time. And when they felt like they wanted to speak to me about it, I let them know that I was open for them. But, until you get some kind of acceptance with this thing that I can't change, and I'll just have to give you that space.
Well, first of all, I would try to find out the nature of what triggered the anger. And like most people say, I'll be willing to help that person, but they definitely have to calm down before I can offer any kind of help or relief.
Brother, we know they're in training. I know you're not background in anger, but if you'd like to offer your opinion, feel free. If not, I won't punish you.
Well, personally, I would think I would try to, depends on what type of role I want to assume. If I want to assume a passive role, then I know that it's very important that you let a person express themselves. And if they're able to express themselves, however, notwithstanding however you feel about what they're expressing, I think if they're able to get their point out, and I take the subservient role and sit and listen, and whether I agree or don't agree with what they say, take the points that I agree and put them to one side, and the points that I don't agree on the other side, and if possible, try to revert those disagreements and those agreements with them until we come to some conclusion. If not, just cut it there.
Well, everybody's got a good insight. See what we can make out of this. See, I heard some good stuff floating around the room. I think, as Melissa pointed out, one of the things you can do, you try to investigate the anger. Part of the validating process is to help this person focus on the cause, what's happening, okay? Try to investigate what has happened to make this person so angry. You try to investigate it. You get, as we call it, peeling that person artichoke. Because we know that we want to move into the anger. One of the things that happens with most of us, when another person gets angry, we panic. We not only take it personally, it actually scares us. We are afraid of others' anger at us. Have you noticed? That is very often what triggers the fight. They're going to do something. They're going to hurt me. They're going to knock me out. They're going to kill me. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. And you flee from that person's anger, don't you? Right? And then you start trying to rationalize. Right? Well, they'll get better. They'll come down. They'll be all right. Blah, 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 blah. But fundamentally, what you've done, you fled the scene. And remember, it's the other person's anger. It's the other person that needs some relief. Right? It is almost as if I come to you with a slash in my hand, you see the blood and you run like hell. how is that possibly going to help you? You see? Right, you don't move into it. One of the ways to move into it, as Willis, right? Brother Willis pointed out, is that you start trying to get this person to let the stuff out, to let them express, right? And you do that by not taking it personal. Don't take it personal. Because if you start taking it personal, right, you're not going to be able to assist that person and focusing in on their anger, right? So you want to begin by helping that person to begin to focus in on their anger. And you do that by asking them a series of focusing questions, right? This is very Socratic, isn't it? And the first focusing question is, what happened to that made you so angry? Right? What has happened to make you so angry? Yes.
One that the person don't want to talk about.
Well, that's the whole idea of you trying to give them some relief.
Right, but they refuse to even talk about it. Well, I don't want to talk about it right now.
They don't really mean that though. Sometimes they need to go deeper. A lot of times they just hurt.
They're hurt, yeah. Sometimes it can be not their real desire.
Right.
Sometimes it can be that. If the person is so enraged, right? Whether you talk about it now or you talk about it later, you're going to have to focus that person. Because if they're too enraged to talk about it now, and they come away from you, and they go into their room, that rage ain't going nowhere, right? It's going nowhere. So when you see them again, somewhere you're going to have to focus in. Without focusing in, you're not going to be able to resolve the conflict, right? So whether you give them some time to breathe or to try to calm them down, you know, and you can try to calm them down. Take it easy, calm down, man. Talk to them. I mean, there's many, many ways, you see. You want to try to, if they're not calm enough, you see, try to calm them down, you see. And that, you just have to be creative about that, how you will go about doing that. But the moment you see them calm enough, you want to start focusing them in on their anger, right? You want to start asking them focusing questions. What happened to make you so angry? They may be very angry at you, right? You want to hear about it. Let them express it. And again, the key to that is that you must be able to not take their remarks personally. Because if you start taking it personal, you see, you're going to start doing a Loretta. Right? Now, you want to start focusing in on what has happened to make you so angry. What has happened? Right? Because something has happened. Right? Something has happened. They've had an experience. They've had a perception. Right? You know the dynamics already. What are some of the other focusing questions we can ask them once we have started the process of helping them to investigate the nature of their anger? Now, I tell you something. Unless you have investigated the nature of your own anger, you won't know the way to assist another person investigate the nature of their anger. You follow me? Why again in Saramba Yoga, in anger yoga, it is essential that you practice the silence. Right? You have to practice the silence. There's no way around that. So you start helping them to investigate the nature of their anger based on your own experiences, your own insights that you have gained from investigating the nature of your own anger. The process is the same. Now, let's look then into how to help this person investigate the nature of their anger. We know that the most effective relief from any anger is understanding. There is no other antidote for anger and its agony and its anguishes and its pain other than understanding. Understanding cannot be increased, whether personally or non-personally, unless that person can start refocusing their attention. Right? They got to bring their attention back onto themselves. So you want to ask them, what made you the most angry? another descent toward moving into the anger, right? You've already asked her what was it? What happened, right? What happened? Not why are you angry? Because that's an invalidating question, right? The assumption is that first let's see if you got a good enough excuse to even be angry. Then, you see what I'm saying? First they got to prove to you that you don't want to ask them why. You want to ask them what happened. That's right. When you ask them why, now this person's got to, now they're trying to do, now you really got them going. You don't ask them why. You don't ask them questions like, what's wrong with you? Right? Because you imply there's something wrong with you because you're angry. That's not normal, that's not human. That you must be in some way flawed, right? That doesn't work. Ain't nothing wrong with it, right? So you want to make sure you want to ask, what happened? Because we know they've had a perception, right? They've had a perception, right? And they're responding to that perception, right? Something that's happened to hurt them. And you want to know, after the person has given you the scenario, what made you the most angry about that whole thing? Now you want to focus them in on it, right? You want to focus them in on what made you the most angry about the whole city, the whole situation, right? We want to get down to this thing. As we move a little deeper, right? And they've given us the answer to question number 2, right? Then we want to go a little deeper, you know, and we want to know what about that, whatever they feel to give us as an answer. We want to know what about that makes you angry. What about that makes you angry? We want to get them all the way down. Then we want to know, okay, how that makes you feel about yourself. Now these are just from the fundamental focus questions. As you investigate, just use this process that you yourself have used. That makes you the most comfortable. Remember when we asked them what has happened, right? We want to help them start locating the object of their anger. Remember the first step we got to do is locate the object of your anger, right? Do we have an idea of what those objects are going to be? All right, quickly, give me object number 1 of anger. Give me an object. Just give me one. No, object of anger.
Object, or you mean,
Yeah.
itself, or
Emma?
abstract?
Give me another object of anger. Blank. Give me another object of anger. All right, give me another object of anger.
Angry at what she was saying.
So Ray, Minister, give me another object of anger. There's 5. Senra? Yes, give me the last one. Anybody? Gotta know your objects. Gotta know your objects, right? We know that we gotta help. If you don't know the object, how are you gonna help this person locate the object of his anger or her anger? And that's the very first thing. They have to locate the object of their anger. That's why you're listening to what happened. And as you're listening to their testimony, what good is getting a person to express if you don't know how to process? You see my point? You want them to express, you want them to talk about it, but you better know how to process it. Otherwise, you can't give them no reason to get to that.
I think you just answered, because I was about to say, well, as they're giving you the information to the questions that you're asking, do you respond?
because I know that's one of the things that I'll end up doing. I'll ask all the wrong questions. Why are you angry? You know, what's wrong with you? You know, I put myself up like there's no way possible you can be mad at me.
Right.
And then that's why I take it so personally.
Right.
And then when that person is responding to me, then I want to let that person know, if they're saying, okay, they're angry at me, and for whatever reason, then I want to try and give them the reasoning why I do this, and they have to accept this. This is the way I am. But I don't want to accept the fact that they're angry at me.
Yeah, you defending that ego.
Right.
That's right. You defending that ego, right? And that's one of the wrong ways of managing another person's anger. It is to go into the defense of our ego mythology, right? Or to flee the scene altogether. Yes, sir.
Isn't that also the way a person that is angry finds out or seeks the generosity of a person who's being sorry? If you listen to the way they're trying to get you to respond to these questions, if they use those words like I'm sorry if you did that, or if they make references to some people say, I'm sorry if you feel that I did something to you. It's kind of like eliminating yourself from even having participated in their anger. And that will cause them to me to freeze up and not want to respond to this question.
Yes, that could shut them down again. So you have to drop all these defense mechanisms, right? Because whose anger is it? Right. Who needs to release? Right. They got to cut in. Right? For what are you doing? So you gotta when they're telling you what happened, you listen now. You're trying to locate the objects of their anger.
Well, they said they were mad at you. That's how we started out.
Yeah. Yes, the other's angry at you. But you still want to, because it's never just you. It's never just single. Right? Right. You might have, in fact, you might have just been the recipient of some displaced anger. It may not even have nothing to do with you. And unless you have the presence of mind, the clarity of mind, you're going to take it personal and respond in a way that is counterproductive, defensive, and you're going to escalate the person's anger, right? And you're not going to be able to give no relief. And usually their anger is buried in a whole cluster of things. And when you get down to it, and when you really go deep into the investigation, when you really go all the way down to the bottom of it, you will begin to enter into their early recollection.
Yeah, I just want to listen to
Bill went off to Loretta here.
I did that by accident. I didn't know that I was asking the right question. I said something to one of the kids at the club, and I asked him, I said, well, what did I say that made you so angry? Yeah. And then I found out that it wasn't me. It was just, I had said something that everybody else had been saying,
right.
And she didn't like it, and then I said it, and she wasn't angry at me. Right. It was just what I had said, which was brought back all these memories of what someone else was saying.
Right. And so that's what happened. Remember, there's a cluster of experiences that is generating the phenomenon. And that cluster of experiences has a psycho-historical origin, right? They're bringing to that moment of rage their whole life, right? Their anger is a part of their biography. It tells you about them, right? It tells you much about them, all right? So in any case, the first level is that you want to hear what has happened, what I've said, what I did, or whatever it is, with no defense, to get them to start communicating, to start expressing. And then you want to be listening with that therapist ear, don't you? You want to start locating the objects of the anger. All right? Actually, they may be mad at you, right? In the case of that little girl, she's angry at you, she's angry at the other kids, right? She's angry at some people that weren't even there, right? She's angry somewhere about, it's a lot of stuff there. And you want to hear that because you want to start tracking this animal down. You want to start focusing this person. You want to start focusing this person, see, so that they can get some insight, all right? And once you've located the objects of the anger, you want to start looking at the triggers, right? What made you the most angry? What was it? What made you the most? Well, it was unfair. It was wrong. You see, people will tell you their own triggering devices, won't they? You want to find out what triggered you. You want to know the triggers. What this person triggered you, especially if you're living with them. Shouldn't you know the triggers? If you're living with a person, I mean, it makes sense. Or if you're in any kind of relationship with the person, if they're a co-worker or whatever, you want to know the triggers, right? If you don't know what's triggering this stuff, then you're very likely to duplicate the same confrontation tomorrow. Whenever you find that you're in a relationship and the same old argument and conflict keeps occurring, probably both are unconscious, right? They keep repeating the same old fight over and over and over and over, right? And we keep reacting to it, the anger, the same old way. So you want to know what is it that is triggering? What makes the person the most angry? What is the triggering thing? Right? Find the trigger. And very often, as you begin to process the trigger, one of the things you help the person to begin to see is that truth. You want to look at the truth content. Remember, triggers are your attitudes. Attitudes are the conclusion that we have reached about ourselves, about others, and about life when we were 6, 7 years old. And whenever anyone violates our attitude or our value, right, it generates the experience of it. So find out what this person triggers, right? And then once you got your hand on the trigger, remember see how you gotta listen? You see how you gotta listen? Very objective. You can't be lost in none of this energy being wasted in defending yourself, right? Your whole attention has to be focused in on listening to this person. With that third view, lest you miss something. If your mind is busy in defending yourself, you're not even listening to this person. You out of the loop, right? And you won't be any source of help for that person. So once you got that trigger located, right, or triggers, maybe more than one, you see. But you want to help them become aware of it. But you have to become aware of it first in order to help them become aware. Then you want to know what about that being treated unfair. What about that makes you angry? What about being treated unfair makes you angry? Right? What about that trigger? What about that? You want to go now even deeper, don't you? What about it? Right? You're trying to get that person into seeing how that makes that person feel. And helping that person to see how that makes them feel. And when you investigate it thoroughly, almost always when you get the person down here, they will give you a word that describes that feeling, that is equal to the feeling of worthlessness. At the root of the experience of anger, there's a sense of worthlessness. Somebody has made me feel worthless. Right? They may not use the word worthless. Sometimes they'll give you the word itself. That made me feel worthless. They often say, you made me feel like nothing. You made me feel like I was shit. Or they'll use some kind of phrasing to summarize how the overall experience made them feel. Worthless, right? Now you locate this. Now we start treating this because that's the real thing. Right? This experience of worthlessness means that there's self-respect, right? It's hit rock bottom. Right? They don't have a feeling of worth. We know that already, but we have to work to help them see that. Now, when you investigate the nature of your own anger, in fact, you should investigate not only the nature of your own anger, you should investigate the nature of your lust, you should investigate the nature of your greed, you should investigate the nature of your attachment, you should investigate the nature of your own vanity. This is complete Sarambago. Swami Maharaj, the founder of the Radha Swami movement, and his Sabasha, the first Vasha, the first teaching that he had is that on a daily basis you should investigate and examine and see to what extent you are still the victim of these five perverted states of mind. And you should focus your energy on it and not worry about it. You see? Don't worry so much about how many sutras that you're going to read today. Don't worry about how many books you're going to read. Worry about this, because this is the essence. That's the essence of all of it, right? You can't master that which you don't know exists. So you want to begin to start focusing this person and giving them some relief, right? And to validate, right, is really setting up the context in which you can do this investigation and this process. So when you validate it right, and remember those validations, there's three validations. The first validation is for what?
Anger, validate their anger.
Right. The second validation is for?
Validate them as a person.
And the last validation?
Yourself.
Right. Because if you validate it yourself, then you won't be taking this stuff personally. Right? Because in some instances, when you listen to what happened, they may have you legit. They may have you right on the money. Right? They may have really encountered an imperfection with them that has caused them a legitimate grief. They might have found something really wrong with you. You see? And if you have not validated yourself and remind yourself that as a human being you have value and worth, in spite of your imperfection, your shortcomings, your fault, what are you going to be doing? You're going to be grabbing and making sure you cover up that fault, that shortcoming. All your energy is going to be in that is to return yourself to this imaginary state of perfection. Right? You will have no energy to really to resolve the conflict with the other person. Your ego will not let you do it. Right? Please make a note of it. The inability to manage our own ego in these relationships always will result in an escalation of the conflict and a failure in the relationship with no exception. It will actually destroy the relationship. It will actually destroy the relationship. So we have to understand how to manage ego in conflicts. Yes?
I have a question regarding it, because if I know if the person is giving me, has told me, has hit it right on the nail, and I know that this is an imperfection, then I'm going to say, well, okay, I understand that, and maybe we just need to just part, and just not visit.
What is wrong with that answer? Critique it for me.
For me?
Yes, what is wrong with that?
Well,
not with the answer, well, not so much the answer, but what is wrong with the action following the realization?
Well, for me, it's a family member, so there's no way possible. We're seeing each other.
All right, clean it up, Alfred. What is
You're
she
not
doing?
giving the person the relief that they're looking for. You just part. It's just like the example he gave about the cut hand and coming through, they're bleeding.
Right.
You walk away.
And not only that, Joe, it's a question about the authenticity and the sincerity of the I'm sorry. I'm sorry means that you have injured somebody. One of your imperfections, shortcoming or fault, has caused a legitimate injury to another person's human. Right? And you're sorry because in your state of ego intoxication or in your state of momentary distraction, not paying attention to other people's feelings, you have somehow accidentally, no doubt, but still nevertheless stepped on this person and then you have hurt them. Now, I'm sorry does not mean simply the acknowledgement that, yeah, I stepped on your feet, so now, so what? What is that? There has to be some restitution. There has to be an atonement. You have to go through an atonement process, don't you? What should that process consist of? You have got to make some kind of retribution of it. I mean, it's all of that in there. Repentance and, the whole 10 yards, all of that is in there. Right? You have envy. You have to seek to make whole. You have to reconcile. Right? You have to reconcile. You just can't say flipping, well, that's just the way I am, and hey, that's again just a more subtle defense of what? That's just the way I am, and that's all right. Even if I did break your heart, it's okay. That's the way I am. Because I am like that, it justifies that. No, that's an ego trip. That's an imperfection. Thank that person. Now try to work on that. Because by working on that, you become what? A better human being. And this is the starting point in all yoga, in all therapy, in all spiritual practices. The first stages of development is becoming a better human being. Right? And the way we get there is that we start off like, no, that's my imperfection. This is some more stuff I need to work on. Right? But if you're caught up in the perpetuation of this ego mythology, you can't grow spiritually. You can't grow psychologically. You can't grow emotionally. Right? You just can't grow. Ego means contracting. Ego means withdrawal. You see, ego means pulling back, right? It is a shrinking down process. It's not an expanding outward. Yes?
I see now, before we had the discussion, I can see why I could really set somebody off with their anger, because the type of question that I would ask would be, what's wrong with you? And even immediately, if they were to point out the imperfection I had, in my defense, I could always find one of them.
That's right.
So that's what I would actually be my thing. Well, hey, I might be like this, but what about you? Oh, now they're really hot.
Yeah, you do a Loretta. We don't name this after you. Finally, you have something named after you. You go do a Loretta on them, right? Yeah, and this is what generates, you see, the company. This is what generates the company. And it goes on, it goes on. And again, you start finding yourself angry at the other person, don't you? Now you know that you have mismanaged the other's anger when it starts making you angry. You know for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, that you have screwed up. You don't have to ask nobody. If you start becoming angry, you have messed up. And that ego has attacked, has gotten into the fray of things, you see. Because you have that desire. Your desire is that people should think a certain way of you, all the ways. Right? You have a desire. And it's your desire. This ego mythology that we have, and the persona that it generates, right? It's all linked in a desire for people to perceive us a certain way. We want to be perceived a certain way. We want to be judged and evaluated a certain way. That's a desire. And whenever that desire to be perceived a certain way that contains all of our ego mythology, etc., is interrupted, or you understand, frustrated, it triggers our anger, right? That anger triggers some moment, right? It triggers the emotional confusion, right? Right? That emotional confusion now shuts down all of the processes that generates rationality, etc., etc., etc. Shuts down memory processes, right? That produces a state of ignorance, absence of wisdom, that produces a negative action, that in turn produces something.
It seems to me sometimes that when you're involved in a situation with another person and they make you angry, because you're talking about real things, and a lot of times you may get most angry at the imperfections that the other point out that you have. And that's hitting your self-respect at the ground level. Because you cannot deny what is true about you. And you know it's an imperfection, but what can you do?
See, that's that shadow material. See, the thing we have to do in order to be of some use to another person, it first started with us though. That's why the preaching is what? And the Saramba Yoga and Anger Yoga, you must do the sadhana. Therefore, you must investigate the nature of your own anger. In detail. Cannot get around. Just cannot get around. Now, I don't think in the manual that I included any information or statements about investigating the nature of one's own anger as a means for managing one's anger. I can't remember including that because there's so much stuff. Maybe in volume 2 we go into that. One of you all, you understand? Do some say what here, right? But you have to. This is the Phoenician. This is the master. You must investigate the nature of your own anger. Now put anger in parentheses because then you have to substitute in all the other 4 words. Right? You have to do that. Now what happens when you investigate the nature of your own anger? You have to go through the same process that you try to step the other person. First you got to get calm enough to do the investigation yourself, right? So you got to come down out of your rage, right? You have to calm yourself down. And one of the ways to calm yourself down is through some quick breathing, right? Some pranayama yoga. Breathe. Breathe yourself down, right? Some diaphragmatic breathing. Bring yourself down, right? Get calm. Walk away from the situation. You must. You see, go into the next room. You see, go outside, take a walk, do something to bring down the level of tension, right? Switch the autonomic nervous system, switch it from the parasympathetic, right, back over to the sympathetic. And you do that through the pranayama breathing, right? We went over that a little bit. Don't take a drink, okay? That's you see. Don't take a drink. Do some breathing. But you got to get yourself calm enough now so that you can begin to investigate the nature of your own anger. And when you begin to investigate deeply into the nature of your own anger, you begin to discover these dynamics that I've been talking about. You discover the psychodynamics of anger. You also discover the metaphysical or the spiritual or esoteric dynamics of anger. You discover that. That's a first-hand experience. And as you practice investigating the nature of your own anger, you become very, very familiar with all of these stages. Hence your ability to be useful to others. Right? And when you investigate the nature of your own anger, you begin to discover your own triggers. What triggers your anger? Have you thought about it? Do you really understand what triggers your anger? You have to find out what about that situation that made you so angry. What about that? And who are you angry at? I mean, you got to do this. It's difficult, no doubt. You see, but once you get into it, it is so rewarding. And as you get deeper and deeper and deeper into it, if you just, even if you don't do it perfectly, we know we never are even trying to do it perfectly. We want to do it good enough. But you discover as you peel your own artichoke, as you focus in on yourself, you begin to find out that, my God, they don't need no fun in it. They don't need work for it. You almost laugh. It becomes laughter. You know? And I'm ready to leave this one because of this. Or I'm ready to leave this man because of something like this. You know? Or I'm ready to, punish my children for 6 months because of this. Right? I mean, it is. But you can't see that unless you turn that attention in, right? Because we know the whole process begins with the externalization of attention off of yourself onto an occupatory being, right? Right, Florida? Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So you want to begin to investigate the nature of your own anger. You have to do that silently. We can go on and on and on about this because this is a really a fascinating thing. But it starts first with us. We have to know how to manage our own anger appropriately before we will be of any use in helping another person manage theirs. Now, here's an interesting thing. Just as we flee from the other person's anger and we don't stand there and deliver, right? Well, something like that also occurs on a subjective, personal basis. We usually run from our own anger. We don't investigate. We run. So, run like hell. Just take off and run. From our own anger. Meaning, we don't look into it. We immediately say, we start, well, that's the way I am. Right? Or that's how I put together. Or you wrong or something. All of those are flights. We don't want to look into it. We don't want to look into the nature. We assume that it's righteous. But we have already said something about righteous anger, that when righteous anger is there, righteous anger means when you're using the anger energy righteous, the right way, it always produces ma'at. It always moves toward ma'at. Right? It always moves toward justice. Right? You can't say this is righteous indignation, and I'm using my anger righteously, and it's not leading to my heart or justice or love or something of that nature. No way.
You know, I tried that, right?
You tried it?
I investigated that, yeah.
You investigated? Okay, give us some example.
like you saying, the more you investigate, the more like you're looking at it, then the anger is going away. And then once you go so far into it, you know, for me anyway, I can see that it was somewhere in my childhood that I responded to this stuff like that, and it just simply evaporated. In the end,
it's over. It's gone.
It was just gone.
Absolutely. That's always the experience. The more awareness, the more attention, and the resulting increase of understanding you bring to bear on your anger, the more it disappears.
I had to catch the trick.
You have
I
to
went
catch
back
that trick.
and see what triggered it off, and then I thought about it. I investigated.
And you went into it.
And I went into it.
That's right. And you got some immediate relief. You got some relief.
Just when you look.
That's exactly the way we count. We investigate. We go into it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I need to know what I did wrong in my investigation because when I did mine, I knew, like him, I knew it was something that happened in childhood which caused me to be somewhat in control. And it has to be this way, or, you know, I don't know how to correct it, and that's at a point where I am. And I know some things that I had done, you know, the Boys and Girls Club is really helping me to grow because, I mean, there was an instance that something had happened and I was really upset. So I did, which is, you know, the running away thing. And I ran away with it by just eliminating that particular program. You know, because this group of kids weren't doing what they're supposed to do. Understanding that my job at that point, now that I reflect on it, it should have been to show them, you know, how to gain the responsibility because they weren't at that point. But I just took the program away because then that still kept me in that situation of control.
Right.
I just don't know.
And you have to locate in your own issues.
She was
origin.
responding
Right.
to something in her childhood. Like if you had a toy or something, somebody came and took you a toy that pissed you off, you wanted to get your toy back, so you just reverted back to that. That's just how you respond.
And you have to look into it. You have to investigate it. You have to go into it. And the investigation ultimately turns you all the way back into your early recollection. Now, a few things you need to understand on how to process early recollection because you will have occasion to work with people at this level. And in early recollections are really like the subconscious stuff that really programs our behavior. You have to understand, most of our responses, at least 98% of our responses are all coming from the subconscious part of our being. They're coming from the subconscious part of our being. But the mystics are called some scholars. These tendencies, these impressions. A lot of these, some scholars that are in the subconscious were formulated even before this birth. So I want you to understand it's a big territory. The subconscious contains a sum total of your experiences across the spectrum of time. And it also includes the experiences and conclusions reached about life 1 million lifetimes ago. It is deep. It certainly, therefore, includes all of the experiences you've had in this life, up to a certain point. Right? So the conscious mind has almost no effect at all when it comes down to it. Almost none. Now, in an early recollection, and we're going to talk as it relates to this lifetime. In your early recollections, what you'll find is that as children, we all reach certain conclusions about 3 things: about others, about ourselves, and about life. Many of these conclusions that we reached were wrong then, and they are wrong now. What we have simply failed to do is to edit them. We have not revisited these conclusions, many of them mistaken conclusions, form the basis of our attitudes. When we talk about our attitudes toward others, each of us has attitudes toward other people. We have attitudes towards ourselves, and we have attitudes toward life. You are not creating those as you go along, folks. They are not spontaneous with the flow of the daily events. You bring these attitudes to events, and events are interpreted through these attitudes. You see my point? Take any event that occurs, and you will automatically interpret that event through this attitude, whatever category that event falls in. And these attitudes are usually fully in place by the age of 7. Psychologically, emotionally speaking. For most of us, you see, emotionally, we are still children. We've never grown up emotionally. And don't confuse emotional growth with intellectual growth. Entirely 2 different phenomena. In fact, intellectual growth is not so important. You see, because emotional growth, where you are at emotionally, is the real locus of the energy that produces motion. It's emotion, right? So when we look into our early recollections, and that's one of the most direct routes for those who cannot meditate, right? Because if you got to meditate, then you can almost literally replay the events, you see, and not just be dependent upon memory. But since most cannot do that, then just a memory is all right to begin with, right? So again, in the early recollections, we will find embedded the conclusion that we've reached about others, ourselves, and about life. We'll find the attitudes and values, because attitudes always generates values, right? This is the formation of your system of ethics. Each of us have a private, subjective system of ethics. And a lot of what makes up our subjective and personal ethics system is based on mistaken conclusions that we reach the truth. And so, Loretta, what we have to do, either go in or you need to be assisted into that, to be quite frank about it. Usually most of us will have to have somebody else assist us, because our egos in the beginning stages of this process are usually so dominant we can't even do that. I mean, we can't do it. We can't do it, right? In fact, when we look back into our life, we usually interpret it through our ego and problems. Yeah, I was a perfect kid. I never did nothing wrong. And just all kinds of things. So usually it takes the help of an outside person to really guide us into this deeper exploration of our own psyche, right? But once you know the journey, once you know how to make that trip, then you got it. And we want to begin to investigate that. Because this is the source of all of our negativity and positivity. Yes.
Bhagwan, is it ever recommended to ask others how they see you, like family members or friends, to honestly tell you just what kind of person you were as a child or in your teens? Or should you really care about their impressions of you?
Actually, you see, it's sometimes very, very, very useful to ask the other person in relationship with you how they perceive you. Because the way they're relating to you is based on their perception at all times. So it's advantageous to know how they perceive you. It enables you to adapt into the relationship. But when you ask that question again, you have had to have made some progress. You can't take it personally. Now, for most of us, right? The first thing we're going to do, Brother Willis, we're going to take it personal. And we're going to start correcting them, saying, you wrong about the damn, you don't know nothing about it. You really are. We know that they don't know nothing about you. You yourself don't know anything about you. That's not the issue. The issue is how you perceive it. It enables you to adapt in this relationship.
It's interesting because so often people are able to be on the money about identifying your faults.
Of course.
But you can't see their own faults as easily.
Right. And that's true of all of us because our attention is externalized out. And so if my attention is externalized out on Florida, there's no problem for me to pick up Florida faults and shortcomings because I'm meditating on her. I'm doing Florida yoga, right? And I got her. I'm seeing her. Nook and crannies, right? But I don't know how to reverse the flow of my attention and see myself. Hence, my own faults remain unknown to me. And because I'm not aware of my faults, I reach the conclusion I'm therefore perfect. It's deep. I interpreted in my ignorance. The absence of knowledge is perfection. The absence of self-knowledge I interpret as therefore I'm perfect. See the thing? So if one can be courageous enough, if one can create enough distance from one's own ego mythology, right? If one can have enough self-respect, then one should, I highly recommend, solicit.
Yeah, you gotta be careful about who you ask though. You gotta get somebody reliable because
Why should I be careful? What is there to be careful about? I don't want to hear anything that'll shatter my ego.
well, I don't know because I
No, the best person to ask is first of all your enemies.
People that don't like
But one is too radical. Right? The best source of this information is your enemies.
Oh my God.
Keep them close to you.
Bhagwan, they get so much mischief involved.
They sure do.
No?
Your enemies.
Mm.
Investigate their perception. Find out what about you has caused them so much ignorance.
What if it's their lack of self-respect that makes them
No. What is that ego defense, right? Don't get into that.
So
Right?
they won't do any mischievous, they won't say any mischievous
They
things
probably
just to
hate
throw
you
you
too much
off?
to do any mischief.
I would want my enemy to know I'm so concerned.
See, that's
see
some-
how all
something
the
about
about you that's making them have that opinion of you.
You have to remember,
right.
you have to remember, Pam, that even in these so-called relationships that you figure are friendly, relationship friendly, right? That you want to have, there's a duality.
Right. Exactly.
There's a duality,
Found it out all the time.
right?
Who you
There's
think
always
your
that
friends
duality.
are, and not your
There's
friends.
times when you hate your man, and there are times when you hate your wife, like an enemy. Now this is the truth. Now this is the absolute truth. There's times when you hate your children. They feel like an enemy. And then there's times when they feel like a friend and a lover. See what I'm saying? So there are no absolute categories that you can slot people. There is a duality. There is a duality. Same with an enemy. Your enemy can become your greatest friend.
And sometimes they really
I
like
found-
you.
You found that out?
I found that-
Testify, brother.
I found that an enemy is a better friend to you than a friend. And that an enemy, most times an enemy is an enemy of yours to me because it's something that about you that they desire or require or whatever, and you have not given them space to investigate or whatever, or you have not befriended them.
Yes.
And on the other end, where you have a friend and you kind of share these things that an enemy, sometimes enemies build up because she has long hair and I like people with long hair. I'd like to be a friend of hers, but she don't set up. Not that you have said, don't come near me, I won't talk to you. But they perceive through their own
Rejection.
right that
They've had an experience of rejection.
right.
And the fulfillment of a need that they feel you could have satisfied.
And sometimes an enemy wants to be a friend.
Usually it is.
Yeah, I've had that.
And many times some of your friends become enemies. I want you to understand the duality of this. I want you to understand the duality of this because there's much insight. Right?
Isn't it interesting
Now, I tell you,
also? I'm sorry.
go right ahead. This is interesting to Pam.
It's an interesting. Oh,
Go right ahead. Go
let's
ahead.
not
Get it
forget,
out.
how your friends, your real close friends, it gets to a point where they're not really all that honest with you about what they feel because they may have a stake invested in being your friend. So they're not really honest.
That's what I wanted to say when you
Yeah.
were saying about her asking a friend about you. Now, a friend, they might, if I really tell him what my observation of him is, I can't use his car anymore.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? So they'll have like biases, the reason why they won't be truthful to you. Now, maybe a wife or a spouse, because they have nothing to lose if you share in common.
Right.
You might can ask a wife, and like you said, you got to be prepared to deal with
gotta be
whatever they
prepared.
tell you. Don't get angry. Because I remember I asked my wife, she said things, and I said, what you mean? What you mean about that? Just forget it. I don't want to talk to you about it. Because and then sometimes there's bias in there too, because she want to manipulate me sometimes.
Absolutely.
Sometimes her manipulation, well, I want him to go do this for me, so she might not be truthfully honest to me.
Sure.
So the best observation, I think, would be dig in as deep as you can, as this brother said, and discover.
Sure. If you can do that, and if you do your own investigation into yourself, again, the most important thing is that is honesty. You must be ruthless and brutally honest. Right? You must divest yourself of all the advantages of your ego politics. Lest you will manipulate the process. You will manipulate your own history to flatter yourself. Again, I want you to begin to see that in all of these relationships, that there's this waxing and waning from dislike to like, hate to love. This is normal. This is natural. And a relationship of commitment, it is the commitment now that really gives us the ability to suppress the hate part. See, if you're my wife and I've married you, right, and I've done that and I made that commitment, my commitment to you as a husband will, in some respects, suppress my dislike for you as a person, right, and enable us to go on with this relationship. It gives me the ability to manage my dislike appropriately. by not leaving you, beating you in your head, or whatever the case may be, right? But when that commitment is gone, you'll notice that they should turn very nasty. When it's discovered we're finna divorce, all that suppressed hatred that you've been carrying for 20 years, it's gonna rise up now and dominate the relationship. It's always there. It was always there, work in the background. Right? Guys, neither good nor bad. These are not value statements. This is true. Estamos andando, that's how it is. Right? So you ask them, is it sometimes useful to elicit others' opinions about us? Yes. But only if you are strong enough to not take it personal. If you cannot take it personal, if you get your level of self-respect up to a point where you can not take it personal, these people will enlighten you. It's like a satori experience. And if you can find that enemy, that person that hates your guts, it's a treasure. It's all great African, Indian, mystic poet saying the medieval period says that his enemies, you know, we thank God for his enemies. His enemies have been like his food. Because they see. Right? They see. They see your shadow. They see the dark part of it. Right? They remind you that you are selfish, mean-spirited, arrogant, whatever it is that has caused them. You see my point? And you can learn much about your person, this persona. Right? You can find out all of the dysfunctional aspects of your persona. Because our persona is just a device, isn't it? Don't get too attached to that thing. It's just a device. It's just a means by which we are able to have social interaction with another human being. It has a useful purpose. Ego in this persona has a useful purpose. So I'm not telling you, you see, that to function, you know, in some kind of order. No. I'm simply saying that you need to constantly adapt your ego and your persona to fit into the reality of your relationships. That's all. Factor out of that persona of yours those things that make your persona dysfunctional. You can tell if you have a dysfunctional persona because you are constantly experiencing conflict in your relationship. You can't get along with nobody. That means there's something maladapted in your persona. Look at it, edit it. It is not you no way. It's just a device. It's a psychological tool. It's not real. You create it. You see? And you should have optional personas. You see? Your persona should be so flexible. Right? Don't get caught up in that stuff. I am that. You're not any of it. That's how I am. No, Loretta. You're not like that at all. That's how the persona is. And it's too rigid. You know, needs to be made more flexible, more adaptable. You see? It's not you in no instance. Even if it's a horrendous monster, it's not you. Don't take your persona personally. It is not you. You are that which transcends persona. Yes.
Isn't that the exact opposite of how society tells us we ought to live our life? That would probably be viewed by society as being a little flaky, not being able to commit, or just not being real. It's like you acting. You're being plastic.
Actually, you see, sister, all mystics say that when one really have a real deeper understanding of the nature of this world, one becomes it. Shakespeare says the whole world is a stage. Literally. These are parts that we are playing. Now we can be good actors or hands. You see? The mystics say act at an Oscar-winning level. You're a good actor. Just as when an actor goes on stage playing the part of a Shakespeare, while on stage, he becomes that character. He has to get into his or her character to give a good performance. But when you destage, you don't walk around now after the drum is over thinking that you have it. That's pathological. Similarly, I used to always say that in these relationships, I am a husband. Be a good husband. Play that role. Play that thing. But now, when you're out of that context, drop it. You see? And return to your own people. When you're at work, play that employee role. But when you're not, drop it and return to your own self. The problem with us, we never return to ourselves. We were simply traveling from one role to the next role, to the next role, to the next role. And out of these multiple roles we're playing, we pick one of them and saying, oh, I'm really this role more than I am the other roles. You see? That's like actually says that, I'm really Hamlet, even though I was playing that bad. You know what I mean? And I played all these other roles, but really I'm Hamlet. It's not logical. You see? You're none of the roles. You are that which plays the roles. You see? This is wisdom. And that avoids any attachments.
That means that most of us are pathological because we adopt one particular persona and we don't shift from it.
Sure, because we become attached to the persona. You see, we don't understand persona. We don't understand spiritual psychology. We don't understand these things. No one has taught us. It's not our fault. You see, we have not been properly cultivated. You see, we've been victims of a culture that really did not know much about the development of human beings. But you see, one of the things in us, is that being made in the image of God, one of the things we have is this omnipotence. This omnipotence is really unlimited freedom. Unlimited freedom to be anything. Just as God can take any form, there can be no limitation on the forms in which God can take. In fact, the universe is God taking form, an infinity of forms. That ability is in us. We can be anything we want. We can be a husband, we can be a brother, we can be a sister, we can be a mother, we can be a father, we can be employed. There is no limit on what we can be. It is a very wrong notion to think that we only can be one thing. And that's what ego does. Contraction. It deprives you of this capacity to be unlimited, to exist in unlimited ways. To just, I can only be this here. If I can't be mean and bitchy all the time, I don't want to be nothing else. You understand? Nerves. Absolutely nerves. And it's a very wrong notion. And it's not any of our fault. You see? Unless one is fortunate enough to encounter the teachings, then one will simply remain in the state. Nothing to do. So you're right. The whole world. But this is what the mystics have said before. That the whole world is blind. All are going astray. All are sinning. What is sinning? Sinning is making a mistake. Sinning is missing the mark. Sinning is a form of inaccuracy. Inaccurate living. Living in this narrow confinement. This narrow self-definition. So you're right. And that is the purpose of these great mystics and saints. They come in the world, they give us eyes to see the nonsense of this. This is nonsense, God. It can be anything. Literally. Because of that part of you that participates in God. That part of you that reflects your divinity. So the whole idea is to move into that part of oneself. And I was telling you at the top of the discussion that in ancient times, in the Puranas, they developed a whole yoga called Sarvamba Yoga that used most of these negative emotions as a means for attaining enlightenment. And one of the kings in the Puranas who hated Vishnu, Vishnu being one of the manifestations of deity, hated Vishnu so much that he became Vishnu because his anger and hatred focused him and concentrated. All he could think about was God. He hated God. Remember that. He hated God, and he hated God so much that he couldn't get God out of his mind. And he became very focused on God, and he attained enlightenment. So if you can't love God, hate God, both will take you there. Both will focus your attention on God. And you become that which you focus your attention on. Please make it. Whatever you focus your attention on, that you become. That's the secret of our omnipotence. We can become anything by simply focusing our attention on that. Completely. Right? Deep. If you're able to focus your attention completely on this table, you will not experience this table as an object outside of your awareness. You will experience this table as yourself. You see my point? If you are able to focus your attention completely on Tony, totally on Tony, you will not have an experience of Tony as an other. You will have an experience of being. That's what Tony has done. She's focused her attention entirely on that body and its history, and she's become Tony. As a result of that, melt down that concentration of attention, and she can re-expand, and she can pick up any other experience that she likes. So that is the whole heart. That is the whole heart. Yes, sister? Now we're going too deep now, huh?
You know, I was thinking, well, my mom, she taught me mysticism when we were younger because when my sisters were pregnant or grandmothers, when they have babies, they said, well, you know, don't be angry with anyone or don't talk about anybody. And you know, because your child is going to end up coming out like that. I mean, it seems like it has that same kind
Sure,
of
because there's a chemistry. Anger has a inner effect at the level of the body. We talk about that, right? It has hormonal components to it, you see. And so when you're angry, you know, the brain and the system generates certain hormones. These hormones then begin to influence the shaping and the outcome of the baby. So actually, you know, in these interlunar stages, right, before it's so important what you do before the baby. They set. Certain children are born with a predisposition to respond a certain way, shaped by the emotional experience of the mother. Now, if you've been raging and going off, that child will come out, see the system. You know what I mean? Just come out, and you don't know what's wrong. This kid just angry. This kid all just born mean. It's just a mean kid. They were born mean. Why were they born mean? Because when they were in your womb, you were having too many experiences of anger. And those hormones were being released into your system. And those hormones were shaping the very flesh out which this child is now. Child is torn. So there's so much stuff and the ancients, of course, had these insights, you see. So yes, when you are with the child, it's very important. And remember, that burden was always put on the husband. It is interesting. It wasn't that woman, you stay calm. No, man, keep this woman out. You do whatever has to be done. That's a man thing. And don't fault the woman. You see, the task of that husband is to be so sweet, to have so much skill that he's able to keep this woman happy. That is your function as a husband. When your woman is pregnant, your whole responsibility is to keep her happy. Now, most men don't even see it like that. Is that right? You didn't do that, brother, so you're not guilty. Yeah, jumpy, high nervous system, the autonomic nervous system is formed in the body. It is shaped by the experiences that the mother is going through emotionally, right? And so you have different types. There's 4 types, you know, that usually covers the possibilities, right? But you certainly have that very sensitive, jumping out of their skin, you know, very sensitive, thin skin, they call it. You see, you got the thick skin. Probably not. You see, they won't grow out of it, they just grow into it. They just keep going along those lines. And unless they have the great good fortune somewhere in their lifetime, right, of being interrupted from the outside by some teaching or some mystic that now they would take them into a process of giving themselves rebirth, of being born. That's how they would know. All of us have to be reborn. just get rid of the trauma of birth. There's a certain trauma involved in these prenatal stages. When you're coming down through that open, your head is being squeezed. I mean, it's traumatic, and a lot of that imprints on it. So it gets really, really, really deep. It gets really, really deep. But when we are able to undergo the process of rebirth, to be born again, as religion refers to, it is at that time that we have a chance to edit and correct all of this stuff. You see? But that is our task. That is our task as human beings. You see? And this is the drama that is unfolding in the form of real life. Just a part of this drama. And so we can get there many ways. You see? So we steered off a little bit, but then again, all of this is good because it's fluff. It enables you to fluff and give depth to your workshops. Because there's a lot of things that happen in life that cannot be explained otherwise without knowing these kind of things. Yes, Tony?
I want you to go back to these 10
Which one?
effects. You know, the
Those
first
10.
one was what? Contemplate?
Yes, yes. When we contemplate, in order to contemplate an object or event, we have to externalize our attention. We start off with all our attention is internalized, right?
We're talking about our aim, right?
Well,
Contemplate.
attention, here,
Oh,
right? Because when we externalize our attention onto an object, person, or event, that is what gives us the ability to experience that person, object, or event. That experience of that person, object, event will cause us to respond, along the lines of the emotions. You see my point? How else can you have an emotional? You cannot have an emotional experience of an object, person, or event that does not exist in the field of your awareness. It's not possible. You see my point? You all follow me on that? So in order to even have an emotional experience, it necessitates an object, person, or event. And that can only be picked up if we externalize awareness. For instance, when you are in deep sleep, what we have called, as you know from our workshop before, Susuki, deep sleep, that third state, sleep without dreams. There is no emotional experience. There's no experiences at all, but certainly no emotional. Because there is no externalization of attention. Attention is internalized, right? And so you have no experience. So Tony, therefore, the whole process begins now with the externalization of attention, right? Focusing it outside of ourselves. When we externalize that attention, we pick up experiences of object, people, or events. And then we usually have an emotional reaction to that. Right? Now, what I was saying is, as the case pertains to anger, the particular thing that we have is a feelings of attachment, right? We have the experience, we get attached to the experience, right? Particularly if that experience is pleasure, or if that experience is somehow the foundation of our own sense of being. And that gets a little complex. Let me keep it simple. So we have this experience of attachment. That's a way that we have responded to the event, person, or object. And when we become attached to a thing, then a desire to remain attached arises. Right? We don't want any separation or loss. It is interesting that the experience of separation and loss are the experiences that generate the anger. Even once we are, even as babies, whenever a child has the experience of being separated or having a loss, the child reaction is one of them. They can't curse you, right? But you can tell that little rascal is hot, right? Later on, they will add cursing and all the other ways, so making themselves clear. But there's a separation when the young child, mother leaves, and the child starts hollering and all that. That child is angry. There's separation. That's separation. The child is angry at that moment for leaving, right? gets deep. But in any case, once we've had the experience of attachment, then the desire to remain attached arises. Now, when this desire to remain attached, when this effort to remain attached to an object, to a person or event, is interrupted, interfered with, frustrated, the reaction is anger. Anger, therefore, is a reaction to the interruption and the fulfillment of the desire. Once that anger erupts now, the next thing that happens to us is become emotionally confused. Some more about this. Emotionally confused. Out of that emotional confusion, right, we shut down, right? We lose memory. And by memory, I don't mean simply means that thing that stores data. I mean that whole process, that whole faculty, that whole mental trip, that thing gets lost. It crashes. It shuts down. And with the shutting down, the crashing of the memory systems, right, then we lose wisdom and go into a state of ignorance. And then out of this loss of wisdom, the state of ignorance, we commit an action. Usually negative. Right, that's when you snap. And then out of that negative action, we undergo a consequence. Right? That's how we generate the experience of bliss. So, now we can create sukha, the experience of bliss, simply by understanding this. So you have a choice. You can create dukkha or you can create sukha. It's your choice. Remember, God has left us all with choices. You can choose to live above your ego, mythology, or not. It's your choice in the matter. God is not forcing none of us to do nothing. If you've been waiting for God to force you to become spiritual, you're going to be waiting until the end of time. That's not ever going to happen. There's not going to be some coercion on the part of God to make you God realize or God-like. That is never going to happen. Spirituality is something that can only occur out of your own free. You are free. You can follow the impulses of your lower parts of your nature, or you can follow the impulses of the divine part of your nature. It is your choice. You can continually remain trapped in your conditioning, which is simply the programming that we each carry to perpetuate our pursuit of what we like and avoidance of what we dislike. That's all the conditioning does. That's its whole goal, aim, and objective. That is its mission, is to not be removed from its own level of comfort, right? And you have the choice to remain stuck in your level of comfort or your level of conditioning. Or you can go against that level of comfort and conditioning and live out of your divinity. And remember, your divinity always challenges you to transcend your condition and your level of comfort with no exception. And God is not going to interfere with that at all. You can live billions and billions of lives. There's never been enlightenment requires your free selection. Spirituality must be an act of free selection. And God does not. I'm stressing this because in the West there's an entirely misconception about the role that God plays in your life. It's not going to force you. It's not like Maharaj used to always say that a guru is not like, Maharaj used to always say that I'm not like some top sergeant that's going to be banging down your door to see if you meditate. I'm not into that. You can meditate out of your freedom or not meditate. The choice is yours. No bolt of lightning is going to come out and strike you. In the gospel of the reading of Jesus, he was saying that living in the darkness is your punishment. You understand? No further punishment has to be visited upon you. The dukkha that you will experience by remaining subject to your lower propensities in itself is the punishment. God is not going to do it. Grandma, why are you frowning?
Oh, I'm not even where I am. I'm just amazed what you're saying.
Yes, yes.
What about those people you have relationships with that the only relief they want from you is they just want to sound off on you, they're not looking, I mean, I had this with my girlfriend,
Yes.
ticked at their husband, they don't want to let them really know how ticked they are.
Yes.
Husband is out on the golf course, so they're gonna take this time while he's gone, and really talk about it like a dog.
That's right.
And this is all they
That's
want,
so
they just
right.
want to blow off, and then by the time he gets home,
Yeah.
they're relieved. Is that that's not suppression, because they think that they're actually getting a release.
They are getting some relief.
They're getting some relief.
Temporarily.
So it's just for me to be the board. I'm not supposed to.
Well, it depends on how much love you have.
So I should actually start trying to peel
Well, I'm
some
not
layers.
gonna tell you exactly what
Because in the
But I was-
past, I was like, yeah, girl, really?
It's almost like, it's like that old story, give a fish or teach the fish.
Yeah, right.
You have that choice. And remember, it's your choice.
Well, I do try to teach them the fish as opposed to feeding the fish, but they're not hungry for it at that time. So I should just, in the meantime, just be the board, the sounding board. Because you'll say, well, you need to really try to come to a workshop or do something. Yeah, girl, what time? On the Thursday, I got something to do. But anyway, he did such and such. You know what I'm saying? It's,
What you have to do, you have to take the anger workshop to them. You have to minister to them where they are, and just where they are. And we have to take, we have to take advantage of the moment, and we do the best we can in that moment. And you would be able to do a great deal if there's this kind of receptivity. Don't torture. Give them some deep, give them some. Yes, Tony.
I find that, especially people who kind of go off, and you tell them about managing their anger, they really don't want to hear managing anger because they feel justified. And I got to cuss this person out. I got to do this thing. How do you really help them to see that that's really not effective?
Well, you see, Tony, these, so I'm a yoga, like all yoga, will only be responded to by individuals who are really poor. So that's one thing you mustn't forget, because it's a freedom.
Right.
That's what I just meant by that whole diatribe. There's a certain freedom that has to be respected. And those who are ready will respond. Those who have not yet exhausted their own options, they will simply not respond. And our task is to simply make as the insights of angry yoga present and available to any and all who wish to take advantage of those insights. But they will have to act out of their own freedom. And there will always be those who will come. And there will be, and naturally, sometimes those who need it the most will be the last ones to come, if they will come at all.
So really, the only thing you can really give them is your example. I mean, if they feel enough about you, maybe they might eventually say, well,
Yeah,
through
I see how through osmosis, that is the best help and contribution you can give anybody is your life. I mean, that is ultimately the basis of your authority. If I can remember years ago, coming to the path, finding out many of the things that we talk so many Sundays about, particularly as it relates to the vegetarian diet and its philosophy. And I can remember being very excited about vegetarianism. I had just discovered the concept, right? And I can remember my sisters next to me, Sarah. And I can remember that Sarah was the only one that was able to adopt the vegetarian diet strictly as a result of the philosophical impact. I had not, in fact, we became vegetarians simultaneously. You see? I had not lived in that. Everybody else slowly had to come. First they have to see you do it. And by my living it, you see, it added depth to the philosophy. But of course, my sister Sarah couldn't go one step beyond that. I guess it was enough. But the point is that some people, but very few people, can respond just to the philosophy. most people going to have an example. And so you have to live it. Again, that's why I said you must do the exercises in the work. You must do the cycle, ultimately, in order to be able to be used by God and people to be useful to other human beings. And there's no way around that. There is no set of books you can read. There is no way to do it from the armchair. You have got to enter into the mud, they say. The old Jewish say you got to go in the mud to get someone stuck in the mud. So we have to go through the work. We have to actually do these exercises, however challenging they may be. All right? And they are challenging. But we're going to have to investigate the nature of anger. We're going to have to do some forgiveness. We're going to have to catch some anger. And all of the exercises that I've discussed, we're going to have to do them all. Even if you only try one day, but you must do that. Because that is the basis of your authority. You don't have any authority because, there ain't no degree and stuff. But see, that's the beauty. And that is what separates mystic philosophy, mystic psychology from ordinary run-of-the-mill psychology. The mystics have lived the experience. And there is no institution you can go to and get a degree in that. They are none. They've lived it. You see, it arises out of their life. And so, when we begin to understand that Islam was not an intellectual conclusion that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came to about the problems of life. It was a lived experience. Buddhism was a lived experience. Christianity was a lived experience. And Judaism, Hinduism was lived experience of these old prophets. It arose out of their living. They didn't put it together from some reference books that they checked out of the local library or a lecture that they attended somewhere. It arose out of their own experience. So, Tony, that's what we have to do. We have to actually go in and get this experience. And so I just this morning was sharing with you the esoteric and the spiritual dynamics of the experience of anger. We can also talk about that same dynamics that generates the experience of lust, greed, attachment, and vanity. All of this stuff can be used. The mystics are brilliant. They've created a yoga that uses every part of us. Much like the pig, you eat every part of the pig, right? Some eat every part of the pig, right? We know a lot of people, they can eat every part of it, right down to the snout, right? Well, the yogis have done that. They've used every part of us to use it as a means to help us transcend. So it doesn't matter which direction you're in, through sex, through anger, through egotism, through lust, you get in through all of these sides. All roads lead to God. Yes?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. How do you investigate the rest of them? The same way we investigate anger?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, because once you got anger, right, then you can begin to investigate the nature of your lust. And how? When this thing in you, this hankering arises, right? When you start feeling, I got to have me that pork chop. Now this is a beautiful opportunity. Now investigate the nature of this desire for the pork chop. Now go into it. Don't run, don't flee. You see, don't panic, don't condemn, don't judge. Move into it. Right? Go deeper. More appropriately, and where most people live, for instance, with lust. Right? Now, and then the desire for another man or another woman. Right? To investigate that whole phenomenon. Normally what happens is that when we are under the throes of our lust, we shut down our intelligence. We have to create a cloud of darkness to work out evil little deeds, right? Now I'm simply saying, no, don't pull over a cloud. Remain aware, very aware. Now, I am having the experience of lust. Lust is entered into the sin. Lust is in. Right? Don't run. Don't flee. Investigate. Go in. And when you go all the way into it, it's about you, the lusts of the It's very profound. That's why in ancient times they were able to use sex in tantra yoga. But the mystics found that if you can enter into sex and go deep into this thing, because what is sex? Sex fundamentally is to transfer energy. It's so powerful. I don't know if you've thought about it, but when we have sex, we are actually transferring energy to each other. First, at the psycho and biological level. See? And what the tantric yogi said, therefore, in order to maximize the transfer of energy, don't have orgasms. When you engage in the sex, avoid the orgasm part. Because when you have an orgasm, it brings it to a close. So you don't want to do that. You want to go on moving into the other's energy deep and deep and deep and deep until you feel the whole body, not just the genitals. You feel the whole body. What you feel in your genitals, you feel in your little throat. It gets deep. You fill up this whole body. Because if you get an orgasm, it's going to stop in your genitals. Not much. You go deep into it. Keep it going. Keep the exchange of energy going until every nook and cranny of your being is filled with the energy. And then you end it. And then you just ride off that energy. No orgasm has happened yet. The old yogis and the yoginis knew how to breathe. That's how we come about pranayama yoga. Pranayama yoga was first incorporated in the practice of tantra and then later into hatha yoga. But in tantra yoga, we know that deep diaphragmatic breathing, while involved, and men need to pay attention to this. If you can postpone your ejaculation through pranayama yoga, you won't have any premature ejaculations. You see? Because you're breathing that whole experience throughout your whole system. And therefore it gives you longevity. Right? And so in tantra yoga, they can make love 6, 7, 8 hours. Oh yes. Oh, the ladies like that, right? Yeah, it is. Find you a good tantra yoga. You know, you don't know what you've been missing. But in any case, the point I'm making is that even through sex, which is usually represented as being the opposite pole of discipline. In a lot of the Western tradition, they say, oh, you can't make spiritual progress unless you become celibate, right? Brahmachari, right? And that's not. So it's a lot of different things. But when you investigate the nature of your sexy, the next time you're having sex, go deep into it, right? Because I like you to do that because I know sooner or later you gotta have sex. You all are hooked, you see my point? But so when you're having your sex, simply go deep into it. Become fully aware, feel it moving through your whole body. Go deep into it. And then next time tell me the difference in the experience, right? And as you go deep into it, it takes all of that exploitation out. The deeper you go into your sex, the more holy it becomes. It becomes very spiritual. Very spiritual. You don't feel nasty. You don't feel like you've done something wrong, evil, or anti-spiritual. You see that it ceases even to do that. It's a very profound thing. Or you can look in your eating. It's another insight. Because most of your lust is in your palate. There's far more lust expressed through your palate than through your penis and your vaginas. Please remember. And most of us, our lust is in our tongue. Palate. That's why the mystics first discipline the palate. They change your diets. Is to not change the way you've been eating. And the benefit is not so much in the nutritional part of it, is that by changing your diet to a sattvic diet, a vegetarian diet, it causes you to break that whole habit. And that's what makes it so painful. Now, you can hardly
practice vegetarianism because waves of food lust just continue. Craving, ooh, I gotta have that porridge. Ooh, I gotta do that. That's lust. You feeling it. You are encountering your lust. You see? And so, this atonement, our palate, is a great opportunity for us to investigate the nature of our lust because of repentance. And so when that craving hits, don't run. Something way into it. Stay with it. Just spot something. Look at it. Come fully aware.